Hello, and I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday night. Thank you for coming to the 10th Lake County Film Festival. This is the Q&A session for Death of a Rockstar, and I'm very excited. This is the world premiere, by the way. We're the first festival to show this movie, and I'm very excited to have the director here, Röckët Stähr. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Nat?
I'm doing fantastic. In costume, even.
What costume? What are you talking about?
and
How dare you?
and in character. So you wrote and mostly performed this rock opera all by yourself, almost all by yourself, and then you animated this film all by yourself. And
Oh yeah, that I totally did all by myself.
this process took 13 years. I'm going to turn you up for a second here. I can't hear you the best.
Oh, sorry.
13 years
Yeah.
from the beginning until today.
Yep.
Why did you become so insane?
Well, it all started when I was about 3. No, I don't know. That's a good question. You really do have to be absolutely insane to decide to animate an entire movie on your own. I didn't quite understand that, I don't think, going into it. And if a friend of mine who was a producer on it for a while, he actually ended up being a consultant very early on when I was just kind of doing it as a means to sort of keep myself busy. And I was just planning on maybe animating one portion at a time and putting it on YouTube or something. And my friend was just like, he's like, this is insane. He said, it's the good kind of insane, but it's insane. So yeah, I don't really know why. It's kind of it's a drive, I had a vision of something and I just had to see it through. I couldn't not finish it. It would have just bugged me forever.
I want to do a little bit of a deep dive here because I really want to dig into how I really find this amazing. And I should prelude this whole conversation. I don't remember if I've mentioned this in conversations we had before, but I repeated this conversation with my mother-in-law like 2 days ago, not even talking about your film. I hate musicals. I just hate them. I just don't like them at all. And obviously I love this film for a whole number of reasons. Take me through your musical background up until the point where you decided to write these songs.
Well, I was joking before, but this actually does go back to when I'm a child because my father was a dancer. And so he did dinner theater and stuff like that when I was a kid. And I grew up hearing musical records. West Side Story was his favorite thing in the world. The original version of Chicago, I remember him playing that record when I was a kid a lot. A chorus line, so I grew up on that sort of thing, but I never really thought about that as any kind of influence. I became, got obsessed with rock and roll when I was about 15 years old or 14 years old and never looked back and just kind of went in that direction. But early on in that, I got into Queen, which you can kind of make the case out. They're very dramatic, they lend themselves to, theatrical things, to theater, basically.
It is crazy they never really did a rock opera, like a full out.
No, there was a play. I don't know if it went to Broadway, but it was in London called "We Will Rock You," where they used that kind of thing they do nowadays, where they just take a bunch of the band or artist songs and they make a story out of it or something, but it's not really for that. Just partly what this was in a way. But yeah, that's the only thing they did in that regard. So
when did you fall in love with rock music?
When I was, 14 years old, I guess I started maybe about a year or so earlier. That when I discovered Queen on my own, kind of through a friend, and then I saw a record in my uncle's record collection of their greatest hits, and asked if I could borrow that, and took it home, and it just blew me away. And especially Bohemian Rhapsody, I had never heard it before that, and I just played it over and over and over again. And about a year later, or within a year or so, Def Leppard's Hysteria came out, and I had been really into top 40 rock radio before that. You know, I just not rock radio, just top 40 radio, and I would obsessively listen to that. And then Def Leppard's Hysteria came out, and it's kind of like a rock record, but like very produced up to sound right on top 40 radio. And that was almost kind of a gateway drug for me when Portsmouth Sugar came out.
One of my first 45s I bought.
Yeah, started getting obsessed with that, and that kind of sort of, you know, along with having gotten into Queen, sort of brought in my being used to the rock kind of sound. You know, my brother was already a big Led Zeppelin fan at that point, and even though I wasn't really paying too much attention to what he was listening to, I'm sure I heard that seeping in the background as well. And then, sure enough, within a year, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction broke big. Sweet Child of Mine came out, and that was it for me. That was what then took me over the top to where once I got into that record, I was like, okay, well, now I have to buy a leather jacket and grow my hair long. And I've never looked back. That's the rest of my life was basically formed in that moment.
Remind me after this, I'll go get my jeans jacket from when I still have it from when I was 16.
I still have the very first leather jacket that I bought. It's a mess, but I still have it.
So, you know, I had, yeah, okay. So, I'm going to skip ahead for a second. Musical references. You know, we were just talking about diversity in sound, and I just rewatched the film again, as I mentioned. And you have, for a hard rock guy, you have a very diverse set of sounds through here. It's not like it's just a Queen ripoff or anything else. The sounds here are very diverse. I even noticed the Ronettes beat. You know, you even have the "Be My Baby" beat, you know, in there. And I had Spotify up. I was trying to pay attention to the song titles, but I sort of like lost track. But you've got one that's even got that sort of classic 60s sound.
Yeah, that's it's called 60 Summer Heartbreak, actually. And yeah, that is very much based on the Ronettes. And it's also based on Tonight You're Mine Completely. Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, which was written by Carole King. That's kind of, the beat is what came for that song from the Ronettes, but the melodies were actually more inspired by Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah. So it's not, it's hard to pigeonhole. And at one point I wrote something, and honestly, when I push it out to people, a lot of times I say it's a glam rock opera, and I think that's because the glam rock songs are the ones that hit me the most. Yeah. Bring Back That Rock and Roll, especially, is my favorite song on it. But there are.
I didn't actually anticipate that was one that people were going to latch on to. Yeah, that's getting the most listens on Spotify, and I've been running kind of a little video on Facebook ads and stuff, and people have really latched on to that. And I wasn't really expecting it. That wasn't a song that I kind of thought, this sounds like a single. Yeah,
I didn't know when we talked the first time. I didn't know any of the song titles, so I didn't bring that up. But that's a great track, man. That is some rock and roll right there. And then, you know, I mean, the makeup and the sci-fi is all Ziggy-ish, and that is but then you hype Queen so much, but there are so many different influences.
Yeah, I just dump it all in the pot and stir it around, and, you know, add a heavy dose of me, because you can't really help that, you know, and it comes out as it is. You know, it's from years of, you know, these songs. It's not like I said, okay, I'm going to write a rock opera, and now I'm going to start writing all the songs from it. A lot of the songs, I'd say maybe 70% of them, were songs that I'd written throughout the years prior, through different stages of my own artistic musical growth. Like I was in a punk band for a little while. I did the kind of folk singer-songwriter-y thing for a little while. I did in the 90s, for a large portion of the 90s. I did the big piano thing where I had a string quartet and all that kind of stuff, which is when I taught myself how to compose, and where that part of the opera comes in. And each one, it's like I do it for a few years, and then kind of get bored of it, being like, no, now I want to do this kind of music. Oh, now I want to do this kind of music. Even there was even a grunge period. I have a bunch of songs like that. So when I was doing this, I already had that, like we said earlier, diversity of songs, or, you know, a pluralism of different styles of songs already ready to put in those spots, and then I just had to write a handful of them to fill in the blanks. So it's not like I went, well, I'm going to purposely write a hard rock one here, and I'm going to purposely write a reggae, like a ragtime sort of sounding song here. And I already had them from just who I had been at different stages of my artistic growth. And I can do that now on the fly because of all those stages. I can be like, for a couple of weeks, I just feel like writing rock stuff. For a couple of weeks, I just feel like writing piano ballad stuff. And, it's from years of developing a skill.
I find that people that like hard rock are some of the most sort of boxed in. Do you find that in talking to fans or just the audience members?
Not really. Not if you really get down to talking to people about it. I think you find that most people have a little bit more of a diverse taste than they might initially seem. You'll find a guy who's like really into Metallica, but you'll notice there's a Carpenter CD in his collection or something. There's a couple that are like, no, all they're going to listen to is death metal and anything else is shit. There's a handful of them, but for the most part, it's like, I meet a lot of people at Iron Maiden shows, and you find out that one of them just went to see Phil Collins. So I think there's, most people I think are much more three-dimensional than we assume them to be.
Cool. One last question before we get into the actual writing of the music, the 5 years you spent writing the music. What are your top 5 favorite Desert Island albums?
Oh, boy. Well, Appetite for Destruction would definitely have to be on there, Guns N' Roses, because that's the record that changed my life. And oh god, top 4. What would I put? I'd have to probably have Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, because it's tremendous and you get 2 discs. So right there, you're kind of like, skirted the issue. You have a lot more songs, and it's just such a tremendous record. That leaves me 3. My wife just whispered to me on the side, All Things Must Pass, George Harrison. I'll go with that. And there I get 3 records in there.
Yeah, another nice book.
And that's just an amazing, amazing record. Oh, God. So that's 3. What else would I have in there? Oh, there's got to be a Queen record in there. And that's a real hard one to pick because there's no particular Queen record that's probably my favorite. But I guess I'll go with A Night at the Opera.
I love that I'm putting you on the spot like this. That's great.
I know. What was that? Was that 4?
Yeah, you got one more.
Oh, man. I'm going to have to go Fleetwood Mac's Tusk.
What is it? Fleetwood Mac's Tusk.
Another album. And it's just, again, one of these ones that just, it's so odd. It's not the big selling one, but every song is so wonderful on it to me. And that's so unsatisfactory. God, there should be a Black Sabbath record on there. I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan. There should be a Tom Petty record, Wildflowers. Like, if I rethink these, one of my favorite records is actually Buckingham Nicks, which was Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham's record before they joined Fleetwood Mac.
Where's Bowie?
That's such a terrible question. Yeah, Ziggy Stardust. How could I not have Ziggy Stardust in there? Oh, man.
I was especially waiting for that because
I really hope I never wind up on a desert island because I'll just be miserable.
Desert Island Hard Drive is what that's what I play. Give me just 1 terabyte and I'll figure out what
my wife and I, 90% of our discussions at home are making lists just like this. We never did the desert island thing, but we have, like, here and there we'll list, like, okay, well, who are your top 5 favorite guitar players? Who are the top 5 best? And we'll write them down, or we'll just, like, talk about it for like 2 hours or something. And we do this constantly.
Awesome. So I feel like I when I think this in my head, I think of like a little pamphlet. So you've decided to write a rock opera.
Don't. Lesson number 1, do anything else, or at least don't animate it on your own. I always tell people that if ever you have the idea, you say to yourself, I think I'm going to animate a movie entirely on my own. Don't do it. Just run.
Oh yeah. But you've already decided to write a rock opera. Right. What inspired you to write a rock opera? And what are your inspirations when it comes to rock opera? I saw a comment on your feed. I'm right there with you. Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh yeah.
I was 16. That was great. But so what were your rock opera inspirations, and what made you decide through all your other musical endeavors that you were doing to say, I'm going to write this rock opera?
Well, in the 90s, because I'm 123 years old.
Aren't you my age? Aren't you within a year old of me?
I have no idea how old you are.
I am 46.
I am within a year old.
Yeah, I can't remember if I saw it somewhere, but we are right on the same page there. So, how about the sabotage?
Which way I'm within a year from you?
You what?
I won't say which direction I'm within.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
No.
What? How about streets?
In the 90s, my stage name back then was The Count. My real name is Röckët Stähr. That's how I was born, of course. And back then, I had, I went from being originally in hard rock bands when I was a teenager. That was what I was obviously really into. When my main band broke up in my early 20s, I kind of started going back into playing the piano again, which is what I had learned how to play when I was a kid first. And from there, I forget how it's a much longer story how I got into starting to teach myself how to score music, but eventually I started to score my own songs for quartets and some experiences like that. And I would make some recordings, and I did a couple of demos back then that were kind of the precursor to some of the stuff you hear in the opera here. And when I play it for people, there were a couple people who were like, "Wow, you sound like a young Angela Lloyd Webber," and I was like, "Cats? Like what? That you're comparing me to the guy who did Cats?" And they're like, "No, dude, you have to hear Jesus Christ Superstar, the original record." And I was like, "The original record? Really? There's a record. It's not just a play." So they turned me on to that, and I heard that, and I was pretty blown away.
The original Broadway cast, right?
No, not the original Broadway cast. Before it was a Broadway play, it was a record, and singing the part of Jesus Christ Superstar was Ian Gillan from Deep Purple. I don't even think he was quite in Deep Purple yet. And Murray Head, who's also a great singer, he was Judas. So yeah, it was a rock record, a double record. It was raw. If you ever hear the original record, it's very raw. It doesn't sound like Broadway or anything. Then it got turned into a Broadway play from there. So that kind of floored me. I didn't realize that was out there.
This is the one my parents had.
Yeah, no, I saw it. It's got a white cover.
Okay, but Ian Gillan is on this one.
Oh, also. Ian Gillan. Oh, then they must have had a different color cover for that. Yeah, that's the original rock record. Ian Gillan and Murray Head.
Apparently this might be the original cover, maybe. But this one actually said, I thought it said on it. No, okay, this is the same one. Yeah, no, this one's great. Yeah, I've heard some of the ones that are horrible, but this is the one I fell in love with that my parents had.
Yeah.
And you can see, here it is.
Yeah.
Ian Gillan. Right. Okay. Well, okay. So you just had a different cover, apparently.
So that was kind of my original sort of introduction into that kind of thing. Of course, I knew the Who's Tommy, but I never really thought about rock operas and stuff. And I had kind of gotten into Rocky Horror at that point, Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is great. That's not a rock opera; it's a musical, but they're somewhat linked, whatever. And so people kept telling me, "You should write a rock opera. You should write a rock opera." And I was like, "I've never written a story. I wouldn't know where to begin. It doesn't make sense to me." Fast forward many years later, I had gotten into Hedwig and the Angry Inch as well, which is another great musical. It's not a rock opera; it's a rock musical. But fell in love with it, and I was started to again go. It's a long story from there because that's maybe 10 years prior, 8 years prior to when I started the opera. I had just gotten back into writing again and playing the piano again after a bit of a hiatus. and I was just starting to orchestrate again, and I did a show with strings, and it was, pretty expensive, but it went over okay. And I just kind of thought to myself, if I'm going to continue spending this kind of money on my music, I want to do something with a little more posterity, something a little grander, a little more complete that I can show or give to people, whether it's my friends or other people or what. And so I had the idea to do a rock opera from there. I just decided, maybe I'll try and do this. And that's, I guess, where you can say it goes. I'm not really into too many other rock operas. Anytime I've heard a lot of other actual rock operas, I honestly don't think they've usually been very good. I think there's a lot of good rock musicals out there, like Rocky Horror Picture Show, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Even Evita could be somewhat called a rock musical. Or cool rock music as the basis, like heavy metal from the 80s.
Did you hear Sabotage around that time?
Sabotage.
Sabotage.
You mean the Black Sabbath record?
No. All right. I'll send you a link.
Song.
I'll send you a link. I think you'll like it. Cool. So I think you mentioned that some of them were older songs. How did you fit everything into the storyline? How did you develop the storyline? How did you fit your songs into the story?
Well, like I said, I had never written a story or even thought about writing a story. So I was had wanted a friend of mine to maybe just listen to a whole bunch of my songs and see if he could find a story in there. And I kind of had approached him to that, and I don't think he's had the time, or he said he didn't know if he would be able to do something like that. I forget how that went down, but one day I was waiting for the subway, and the storyline hit me like a bolt of lightning. Basically, it just kind of, the idea came to me, and I was just kind of like, oh, and my subway came. And by the time I got to my destination, I had probably about 75% of the idea fleshed out in my head, and I knew almost exactly what songs that I already had written that I'd be like, that would be perfect for this spot. That would be perfect for this spot. This would be great for that. So that was kind of the start of it, basically. I just kind of took it from there, and I realized, okay, well, I don't have a song for right here, so I'm going to have to throw something together for that, or right here. But I had most of it all together. I mean, to the point of where there's some riffs in it that go back to like the early 90s, like when I first started writing songs. There's at least one riff in there like that. That song 60 Summer Heartbreak that you talked about with the Be My Baby beat to it. That dates probably maybe 7 years prior to when I started working on this opera. The song Death of a Rockstar itself, and a couple other songs on there, Ballad of a Starry-Eyed Child, Umbrella, and maybe one other I'm not thinking of right now. Those were relatively new when I started. I had recorded the demo of them that actually became the opera about a year before. But the song Death of a Rockstar was actually about David Bowie's last show with Ziggy Stardust. If you listen to the lyrics with that in mind, I had read an article about him. I have a really cool old magazine that has a bunch of old NME articles curated in it when they reviewed shows and records from the early and mid 70s. And one of the articles was Bowie being interviewed about his last show as Ziggy Stardust. And a lot of what I read in there became the basis of the lyrics that I wrote for that song. So when I kind of came with the idea for this and I plugged it into there, I was just like, no, it just works fine. You'd never know it was about that unless I told you like I just did.
I gotta try and, there's so much, I gotta try and like keep this in some sort of order that makes sense, because you posted on your Facebook page. You posted that picture on your Facebook page recently, and that opens up this whole other thing. Actually, let me go back 1 second.
What picture did I post?
What'd you say?
What picture did I post?
The picture from Ziggy's last show.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, and how you made an homage in the film.
Oh, did I post it on Facebook?
I thought it was on Facebook. You want me to pull it up?
Oh, wait. Did you happen to sign up for my mailing list?
No, I have not yet.
Because I have like a whole thing in there that, if you sign up for my mailing list, you get like an alternative ending and a bunch of bonus materials. And one of the things is once a week for 26 weeks, I do a video where I talk all about the making of each song and the animation and stuff. And in that, I put the picture that I did the homage from that Bowie picture. I don't remember putting that.
Oh, I see so much stuff that sometimes it's hard. I don't remember signing on to that, but I feel like I saw that picture. I mean, somewhere I did. I knew because I knew about it, and that was really cool. You know that. Well, yeah. No, I'm getting ahead. I missed something already. You were in some bands and you broke up, and honestly, a one-man band, the whole idea is kind of uncommon to begin with. So, for the most part, when I see people that are in one or two-man bands or anything like that, it's just because it was just too hard to keep band members around and deal with that aspect of being in a band. How did you wind up starting to make all of your music by yourself?
Because I'm a control freak. I mean, you know,
it was the play. I was saying,
I mean, there's a little bit of like, you know, even in the story for this, there's so many things I wanted to accomplish with this story, even though it kind of came to me really quickly. It all made sense, and part of it is it didn't get completely fleshed out in a way, but it's slightly, really loosely autobiographical, and one of the things in there is about not becoming that which you hate. That's one of the sort of lessons or underlying themes in it. And one of the struggles with one of the characters in there is trying not to become so controlling, or like he's led to feel like he wants to be controlling, but that's what he's also at the same time trying to opposing. And that's kind of me in a way, or you know, most of it.
You're talking about the scientist, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, you're saying in some ways you're the scientist.
In some ways, I'm all of those characters to some degree or another. Whether even though it's not me entirely, you know, you fight those inner conflicts or inner demons. You know, you know, I don't want to control anybody or anything in a way. Yet you find yourself trying to, and so you fight that all the time. And you know, with my music, it is kind of like I'm a mini dictator with my own music, like the czar, the dictator guy in the movie. He's a dictator in that way, but in a degree, even though I'm not in any other sense of the word in life or anything, in that one little regard in my life, as far as my music goes, I am going to dictate exactly how everything is. I programmed the drums into a drum machine and gave them to the drummer and said, play it exactly like that. I wrote all the string arrangements out. I was in the studio with the singer of the female vocals, Abby Ahmad. And I was, you know, she was so great at taking my direction, but I was like, you know, just how I am with them. Like, well, can you sing this line a little bit more like this? Or that kind of thing in your voice, just very, you know, controlling, because I hear it how I hear it. And that's how I want it. And I was not like that in bands that I had before I went solo many years ago, but it's just kind of how I could see that going in me, where I guess I heard things in a production sense, or I heard my music in a certain way. When I write things, I sometimes already start hearing the string parts if it's a song that's going to have strings in it. And I don't need something. I tried to work with a producer for a little while once who you know, made my sound a little more basic, and it was fine or whatever. But even in that, I started trying to control things and trying to tell them, well, here's how I want the bass part to be, or here's how I want this to be, and cause a bit of friction there. But it's just how it is with me. I hear what I hear, and that's how I want it to come out. It's the one thing in life that I am going to be in full control of it as much as I can be.
Last question. What?
I don't remember what the question was.
I don't know. Why you are a one-man band?
Right, yeah.
You know, and I was saying that, I was assuming that, but the polite way to say that is that you had personality conflicts with the other members of the band. And
no, I didn't really. I'm actually, you know, it's odd because when I was in those band, you know, the last real band in that regard I was in my early 20s, you know, I wasn't quite like that. My brother was also in that band, my older brother, and we kind of each wrote our songs, and you know, we do a few of his and a few of mine, and it was much more collaborative. At that point, I wasn't really thinking along those lines at all. It was actually really only after that, when I didn't have a band and I started kind of thinking about, oh, well, here's what this song, what I would want this to sound like. And that's when I started realizing, well, if I want someone to do that, I'm going to have to pay them, because if anybody's just going to come in for free, they're going to want to write their own part or do their, put their input into the thing. So it wasn't really quite like that. It wasn't like, oh, I couldn't get along with them and that's why. It was just sort of how things developed after that.
Is there, and the answer might be no, but is there anything interesting to be said about the order that the songs came to you, or the orders that you wrote them? Is there like the last song that clicked into place, or okay, that's fine.
No, I mean, like I said, like I wouldn't even say it's I've got a lot of material, and it's not like I said, well, I'm going to take all my best songs and put them in this opera. I really just said, okay, what are the songs? I'd go get to like a certain part, like the Turn It Up Loud song. I hadn't sat down and worked that out, but it had been a song that I was messing around with in my head for a little while, because I had been listening to Slade a lot, the band Slade, the early 70s glam band. And I was like, I want to write a Slade type song. That's what I do a lot. I'm like, wow, I'm into that band. Let me see if I can write a song like that. So in my head, I had the Turn It Up Loud part. I had the verse and the bridge. And so then very shortly after that, I had come up with the story. And I was like, I have the perfect song for that already in my head. So that's basically how it went. I had just kind of had them going on. I'd be like, oh, here's an unfinished. A lot of them were unfinished songs. There were maybe 5 or 6 that were finished. A lot of them were song ideas that I had fleshed out but never did anything with, or parts that I had that I needed to turn into song. And then there was, a handful that I just did from scratch because I needed something in that spot.
Cool. So you wrote it, and then you felt that you needed to add some visuals to it.
Yeah.
Tell me. Okay, fine. I suck as an actor.
Well, I don't even know it was. When I was originally doing it, I wasn't like, oh, I want this to be an animated rock opera. Which, by the way, I think this might be the first animated rock opera in history. I haven't found another one yet. Anyway, I didn't know if it would be a play, a production like Jesus Christ Superstar. There was a brief period that I kind of thought, well, maybe I could do it with puppets or something like that, And pretty quickly I settled on I'd like to do it with animation, and I didn't know how I would go about that. I sought out a bunch of other anime. I wrote a full script, which is pretty much nothing like you see in the movie. Except for the beats in it are the same where they are in the beginning and the end of the songs, but everything else in the script, 90% of it is completely different. But I kind of shopped that around to a couple animation houses and was like, here's some songs I have, and here's the script. Do you want to make this movie? And they were like, well, this is really cool, but do you have millions of dollars? I was just very naive about what it took to do something like this, So it wasn't my intention to do this. I didn't set out to do this on my own. It just what I never would have thought of doing that at first. I probably would never would have started it.
I suck at acting and like asking questions I know the answer to, but yeah, you kind of went through all that with me, so I was trying to pull that answer out of you. But you did mention kind of having the delusion that you could maybe even do a live action version, Yeah.
Which I'd still love to do if at some point, like someone from Broadway or somewhere sees this and wants to put a live production, I'd love to have this done live at some point.
So I got to tell you, I love, especially when I program short films, I'm always looking for ways that things connect, and I'm always finding these weird parallels between movies I'm showing. And I just thought of one I hadn't thought of before just now. One of the documentaries we're showing is a documentary about Bally Midway, the video game company, and they made Mortal Kombat. And a portion of the movie is about the Mortal Kombat movie, right? And so they've got one of the fighters has 4 arms in Mortal Kombat.
Right? It's interesting you bring that because, like, when I first wrote the script and came up with the idea for the movie, and hello, doggy, and started drawing the character, he didn't have 4 arms. That wasn't the original idea. In fact, like in those bonus materials I mentioned that I send to people who sign up to the email list, I have a bunch of original drawings that I did when I was first starting out doing this, and the original versions of the Rockstar don't have 4 arms. I forget where I came with that idea. I just said, why doesn't he play the bass and the guitar? And just make it a little more interesting and sci-fi. So yeah, I hadn't really thought of that originally, but since then I think I've Googled a couple times four-armed cartoon characters, and guys like that have come up.
Well, I'm here to tell you that it's a substantial part of the movie that that in the Mortal Kombat movie, which was a $40 or $50 million production, the four-armed guy was literally the worst thing. And they were talking about how they spent millions on the four-armed guy, and it never worked. And they had to cut all the lines of the four-armed guy, and as little as possible. There's some great footage, behind the scenes footage, of basically they designed this thing they put on top of a guy, and it's animatronic on top of a guy.
Oh wow!
But they said they spent hours just waiting for him to be ready. So
what year? It could be the 90s, right?
Yeah, 94, 95.
I could probably do it now easily. But it's funny because when I was briefly, I thought about trying to go out and play live myself, and I thought about getting that guitar custom made and getting an outfit made with the four arms. But of course, what I would do is I'd have, like the two arms, like the lower ones just kind of stuck on the guitar, and, have a string on my hand and just move, up and down like a costume, Luckily, that's one of the 8 million ridiculous ideas I have that I didn't go forward with. But if somebody did do a Broadway play, that's how they would do it.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you didn't try for the forearm guy, like for the movie. I know. I did just wonder when I thought of that if a 3D animated movie would be a little better, a little easier. Once you make the model.
But I'm just not. I'm not really into 3D animation. So I mean, it's amazing what they can do, and even with modern effects, like I hate to sound like a Luddite with certain things because I'm not at heart, but I do love, like, for me, the pinnacle of special effects is the 80s. Basically, it's where animatronics really kind of hit its stride. It's right before the computers came in and took over for animatronics and what they call now practical effects and stuff. There was just so many awesome movies. The Dark Crystal, which started in the 70s, but still is an 80s movie. Labyrinth, Never Ending Story. These really effects, that they just seem more tangible and real. And what was the original thing I was talking about? How to get for the 3D animation. It's like that as well. It's amazing what 3D animation looks like. It's stunningly amazing. But for me, I will take the animation in the movie Heavy Metal any day of the week, or the animation in Pink Floyd's The Wall, or even Yellow Submarine, which was what kind of probably mostly inspired the animation style I did with this. That 2D hand-drawn stuff. That's what really, for me, that's just what does it, to each their own. But so I wouldn't really be into something. It just kind of, to me, would kill the character and the spirit of this, because my music is retro sounding, and I work hard to make my music sound as retro as it can, even though it's all done on a computer. So it would have been weird for that, and then I would have had 3D animation, on top of it.
Yeah.
Plus, have you ever noticed, like, 3D animation without a really big budget looks really crappy?
Yeah.
Kind of chintzy.
I was thinking about how if it was 3D animation, you just have to try so hard to make your character look the best. And once that character was like,
then he can turn around and all this stuff. Yeah.
Did you ever see the Iron Giant?
I've been meaning to see it for years, and I almost watched it on a plane recently. And I have not seen it yet. And everyone's telling me to cry a lot, and I don't want to have to cry, so I keep putting it off. But the animation, I've seen many scenes from it, and that is the kind of animation that I love. That's really excellent.
Well, you probably didn't know this, but it is a mixture of 2D and 3D.
Oh,
the Iron Giant, yeah. So a lot of the backgrounds and stuff are 2D, but then the Iron Giant is 3D. But they've made him look 2D.
Right.
So if you had
totally cool.
2D, if you had your 2D stuff and then you made Röckët 3D, and you would have an easier time of doing the things that you need him to do. But then you'd also have to add some sort of filter.
Yeah.
They actually wrote a program
8 years ago to tell me this.
Yeah, well, yeah. I remember reading they actually wrote a program to add a certain amount of variable in the Iron Giant in the outline. So like let it variance by like 3, like 3% or however it works, so that he wouldn't really look like he's 3D. But in an effort to make things easier and cheaper.
That's the kind of shit you really need like an entire team for.
Yes.
With mine, I did work hard to make it look as paper drawn as I could, even though it's in, it's vector art in a vector program called Toon Boom Harmony, which is it's a professional program. I think they've used it in like the Simpsons movie and stuff like that. But it's all directly into the computer, drawing on a Cintiq. And I did take pains to do certain things to try to make it look as hand drawn or 2D as I possibly could.
So to go back, you decided to animate it. You couldn't find anyone else to do it. Tell me, even though I already know, about your history in drawing. Like you have not. It's not like you were spent your life drawing stuff and then decided, I'm going to draw this. Yeah.
When I was younger, I was like in high school. I was a pretty good portrait artist. And in fact, right above my head there is a picture of Queen.
Nice.
The inside of the Queen 2 record, and I drew that in 1989. When I was, I don't know what I was, 16 years old, I guess, in 89 or 15. I have no idea. Something like that. I can't count right now. But so I did portraits a lot, and generally not in color. I usually just worked in pencil. I would draw Axl Rose and shit like that. My friends would have me draw pictures of them and all that kind of stuff. I was pretty good at it, but I stopped, in my early 20s or so, probably because I just got busy with so much other stuff, especially music, since songwriting became my life, and I just didn't have time to draw. It takes a long time. So when I started doing, I was never good at illustrating. I could never cartoon. My older brother was very good at that. It's a different kind of talent in drawing, largely. I mean, I'm sure some people can do both, but it's a looser hand, the ability to just look at somebody and just quickly sketch a cool caricature of them that really looks like them, even though it's kind of distorted. I never had that ability. I could only really realistically draw an eyeball and then make a face, all shaded. That was how I drew. And again, back to those extra features, some of the bonus drawings that I emailed to people, those early versions of characters were like that. I did them a little like more shaded with a pencil on paper. They're pencil and paper drawings of the characters when I was developing them, and they're shaded and they're not human realistic, but they're a lot more realistic looking. But when I started getting involved in this, I just tried to figure, okay, well, if I'm drawing on a monitor, maybe I can loosen my hand up a little more. It doesn't quite feel like it does when you're drawing pencil on paper. And I watched just a shitload of YouTube videos on how to draw caricatures, how to, draw cartoon faces. And I, do what they did, and I do it over and over again. And then I try to do my own real loosely, draw the shapes and change the lines. And that's literally how I came up with pretty much all the characters. And once I got a couple of them, I started feeling a little more confident that I could illustrate, at least as far as this one. It's funny because it's just not an innate skill I have, but I worked on doing it to be able to do it. And if I wanted to do it again, I'd have to relearn to do it because I haven't done it in like a year. So it's just like, I lose these skills really quickly. I always have to, even when I go back to music, I didn't play for many, many years when I was doing this. And then I take a couple months to really relearn kind of how I play the piano, or really, I know them basically, but like my hands don't feel right on it. I have to relearn how my hands work on it and how I play the guitar, because I do a lot of, and jack of all trades kind of thing.
I mostly only really Photoshop stuff for the festival, and every year there's always, I'm like, I got to do this again. All right, let me figure out.
Remember, but what's the key command for erase? Like, well, recently, like I've said 8 years, animating this, using that program every day. There were, sometimes for like fucking 14 hours a day or whatever, and then I didn't do it for about a year, and then I had to use the program again, and I couldn't remember a damn thing about it. I couldn't remember very basic tasks. I'm like, I did this every day, all day long for 8 years. How can I not retain some of that information? What is wrong with me?
Yeah. Don't ask me what menu something is in.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
It just goes right out the memory hole.
Yep. So you kind of already answered. I had this idea. I was trying to lock things into some sort of symmetry. I was curious about your influences in music, and then in the opera, and then animation. And you said basically heavy metal and Yellow Submarine.
Yeah. Let's see. Heavy metal. Pink Floyd's "The Wall," the animation in that by oh God, what is his name? Scarf. I can't think of his first name. Is it Jeff Scarf? Gerald Scarf. Gerald Scarf. The animation in that is tremendous. There's just a few, little segments in it that they mostly show over and over again, but it's just incredible. That would have been if I could have had somebody do that, with $200 million to hand draw each frame like they do in there. That would have been it. Second in line would have been heavy metal. Just really cool animation. It's rough, but it's just cool. It drips with cool. And even that kind of thing in heavy metal, which is a bit in my opera, which is something that I love about 80s rock culture and that stuff, the overt sexuality in it. There's a lot of new ladies in that, a lot of sex.
So I was watching it. I was watching it today, and I wanted to show my son a little bit of it.
Of my opera or heavy metal?
No, of this.
All right.
Of Death of a Rockstar. Because he kind of likes homages and parodies and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, hey, check this out. I was watching it, and it was King Kong, and then it was The Shining, and he's kind of obsessed with The Shining because he hasn't seen The Shining, but he's seen some parodies, and he seems kind of obsessed with it. So I was like, look, it's King Kong, and then using the guitars and accents, like, oh wow, The Shining, and then I accidentally let it play a little bit,
and then he blows up the airplane with his meaning. Yeah.
That was fine. But then she pulls up the tent, and there's a woman with a strap on. I was just like, oh, don't worry about that. That's nothing.
How old is your kid?
9.
Oh. Well, you got to learn at some point, I mean, yeah, I love that kind of thing. There's my Instagram feed is basically filled with that kind of artwork. I guess it's adult artwork, you would call it, or erotic art. Like Slash shares a lot of that kind of stuff on his Instagram all the time. I just enjoy it. To me, there's a lot of that's part of rock and roll culture in a way.
Sure.
Part of that kind of animation culture, like adult style animation, erotic animation, and it's also fantasy. Part of fantasy. I'm wearing the Conan the Barbarian shirt on here, and pretty awesome little shirt. And there's a hot chick on there with Conan, and they're all muscular, and I that kind of shit I think is really cool, and I wanted that to be in my opera as much as I could. If I do another one at some point and have someone else animate it, it'll be even more over the top than that. It'll have
by the way,
overt sexuality. This is probably why I'm not getting into many film festivals, quite frankly. In this day and age, my producers at the time, my advisors, kind of warned against some of that. They're like, "This isn't going to go over well today." I'm like, "Well, this is who I am. What can This is what I
got a Facebook message here if you can read it. Oh. I just watched this today. Great movie. The soundtrack is fantastic.
Oh, I didn't see that.
You see it on the screen there? No, that was a comment on this. We are in a live stream.
Oh,
and that's a comment.
Okay. Oh, Pepper Anamaya. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you very much, Pepper. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. I don't know if you listened to the soundtrack just from the movie or heard it on Spotify, but either way, I really appreciate hearing the feedback. After all those years of working out alone, not knowing what anyone would think or give a crap, I've been getting some feedback lately, and it's heartwarming. I love every single piece of feedback I get, unless it's bad. Then I don't want it. Then I don't want to hear it. But thank you, Pepper.
Question. Did you have any of the animation in mind when you were writing the music or recording the music, or before you decided to animate it? Did you have any visuals in mind for any of the songs?
I think so. It's kind of hard to remember now. I mean, like I said, I wrote an entire script. It's like there's so much going on. Like I skip over things and I can't remember. Then I think, oh, that's right, I did this or that. But I did sit down and write an entire script. Bought a script writing program and looked up on the internet how do you write a script, and you look at some Dog Day Afternoon, and this is how you write it out, and so I wrote it, piece by piece of exactly what I wanted animated here and there, and almost the entire thing. Once I then sat down to animate, most of it I'd just be like, yeah, I don't feel that, or that just seems too complicated. I'm going to do something much simpler. And as I kept doing it, it kind of turned into much more of a free form animation style. There were certain things that still played out. There were certain jokes that I wrote in the script that I wanted to be that did still work, and I managed to have them in the opera. And there were a couple scenes that are piece by piece how I wrote them in the script, like almost completely. Like the first song, Death of a Rockstar, I always had that in my head as it felt like it should be in slow motion. It just feels like a slow motion train wreck happening. And I have almost, I would say if I look back at the script, that's almost exactly as is. But then there's a lot of other ones, like the Just Like Magic one, with the anatomically correct
So
hard on stage, which is supposed to be love at first sight, basically. That I did on the fly. That's not in the script. I had no idea that's what I was going to do until I sat down that morning and started to actually draw it. But I knew where I needed them to be from beginning to end, because that still, the thrust of the story still remained intact. There was a couple of them where I was like, where I got at the end, I was like, oh shit. There's one where at the end of the song, the runaway Ronnie Way, she's on the edge of a cliff. But in my script, she's at the edge of the beach. And, he walks over to her and they do this big song dancing. And so when I got that and I had animated that, I forgot about that. And I thought, oh, shit, how's he going to get up to her? And that's when I immediately had to come with, well, he'll just pull umbrellas out of his head and, let the wind take. So I had to just kind of think on the fly about how to make that work. I wasn't going to go back and do it all over again. So I just kind of had to I'd invent the problem by going that way, and then just have to be creative and think about where I went from it there. And if, I also kind of let the lyrics and the feel of the song and those things kind of guide me in it. I probably couldn't even remember most of the stuff, but if I went through the whole movie, I could probably tell you, oh, well, this line, it may not make sense at the moment, but it reminded me of this movie, and that's why I drew this here. And, so there's always a bit of a tie-in to it in a way.
I've got three things I have to remember to talk about before I wipe this up.
Okay.
But you keep reminding me of other things I wanted to mention or hear about. I wanted to say this is my first animated feature Q&A. I haven't had really an animated feature that I remember at the festival and then somebody showing or whatever.
That's awesome.
When I do live action features, I usually ask, because this happened to me. Obviously, there's always production problems, and sometimes they wind up making things better than what it was before you encountered the problem. And I wasn't going to bother asking you that, but I feel like you gave me a perfect answer for that. Like, you painted yourself into this corner, and then you made something that's even better than whatever it was.
Well, this entire thing was a production problem from beginning. You have to remember also, I'm using my Mac. It's a decently powerful Mac, but I would pour so much into each of these scenes. There's a lot going on in some of these scenes, and the program kind of kept getting better as it went along and adding better features that I then would learn to use and make it a little more detailed. That shading that's in it that didn't exist in that program when I started, and then eventually I had to go back and update all that stuff, which took me a good 7 or 8 months. But doing all that takes a lot of processing power. So there'd be points where I get in these scenes where it was running so painfully slow, I'd have to draw a line and wait for a second to show up, then try to make a move. And it's a little bothersome because it actually probably would have, if I had some, who knows how many $1,000s to get some kind of supercomputer that could have handled this easy, it would have been a better looking movie. And there would have been a little bit more complication because I could have just done things quicker and fixed them and moved them. But there were plenty of times where I was like, I'm just going to do this simple thing because I can't even make it do anymore. So I had to kind of, you just have to work with the limitations that you have.
Things like
Maybe it would have been worse. Maybe it wouldn't have been as good. Maybe the limitations helped me be more inventive and come up with things I wouldn't have. Who knows?
Was it mostly like the crowd scenes and things like that, where there are a lot of...
Well, there was a lot of scenes. Even like I just said, the umbrella one. There was so much stuff where he kind of like curls up and turns into the umbrella, and when it's to help her guy down to the ground. There's just so many little things going on in that to make that motion to when you have to add this thing called a cutter in, because one thing goes behind the other, then comes out the other side, and each of those things makes the program run slower and slower and slower to where you can almost barely open the thing up, where I'll have to turn off a bunch of other stuff and sort of almost animate blind. I can only animate while seeing a certain amount of things going on. But the crowd scenes, definitely. There's just tons and tons of people. It slowed it down like hell. And I would have to, when I'd work on foreground stuff with that, I'd have to turn off all those crowd people so that it could function properly. And even that would take a while. The computer is going through turning all those things off and turning them on again. So, it probably would have taken me 2 years if things worked properly instead of 8.
Was there a specific order you did the songs in? Because did you learn throughout the process as you were going through them?
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm curious. Okay, get to the root of why I thought about this. Man, if there's any reason I thought and that maybe you weren't getting play from festivals and things like that, it's that a lot of the film has kind of a remedial animation style that people aren't used to. It's not 3D. They're just used to something that is teams of people.
Yeah.
But just like magic is amazing, is the complete opposite of that. That could play anywhere. I mean, if there's anything to show off your animation style, that video is amazing. So I was just thinking when I watched it, did you do that last? Did you learn a bunch of stuff while you were doing the rest?
No, well, yeah, it is. That's a little bit interesting in that, at the point to where I realized I wasn't going to get anybody to animate it. And so I decided to maybe start trying to do something myself. I initially was just going to illustrate like certain scenes of each song, right? Like almost like a giant animatronic or like a comic book. And maybe look at, I was going to think maybe I do it like that. Like to the music, I just show the scene and it move on to the other still, right? And I got to about the midpoint of the second song, 2164. And it's the point where the army, they can draft the guy or whatever. They throw this guy up in the air and he gets into this chamber with these robotic arms that are tearing his clothes off and throwing the military uniform. And since I was thinking that I'd finish all these drawings, like I'd at least get this design of it, the look done, and then maybe try to look for financing to get it animated. I thought, well, how am I going to make them understand what's going on here? These robot arms are moving. So I thought, let me just try to rudimentally make this move, in this program, figure out the most basic thing to make them go up and down. And so I did that, and that was pretty easy. And I thought, okay, well, now the rest of it looks a little static in that scene. And so let me just try and see if I can learn how to make the clothes look like they rip off. And it's that kind of thing where, like, something's really dirty and you spill something on it. And so you just kind of wipe it off. And then it makes you realize how dirty the rest of the floor is. And so then you just kind of keep going. And before you know it, you've washed the entire damn floor. It was like that. I just sort of started doing the one thing and led to another. And before I know, I was like, well, I guess I'm animating this whole thing. And I just kind of never looked back. And as it went along, it was pretty raw animating at that point. It's not what you see in the movie. Even though that scene is still there, that very first animation, I eventually went back and really finessed it to make it fit in with the rest of it. But I ended up, then animating from there. I think I animated one more song after that. And then I went back and animated the first song. And then I went sequentially from there throughout the rest of the movie. But as it went along, I got better and better at it. And the program itself came out with new tools that helped it move better and become just a little bit more not 3D, three-dimensional, just give it a little bit more depth, the shading and stuff. And that started maybe about a third of the way through it. I finally got to the point to where the rest of what the whole movie ends up looking like. And then eventually I had to go back and redo, not completely redo, but update all that earlier animation, smooth it out, make it look as much like the later one as I can. But if you watch it with that in mind, you can tell those first two songs, the characters are moving a little more clunky. The emotions that I'm using, the choices that I'm making as far as where they're standing, what they're doing, looks a lot different than it does in the second half of the movie. Because it's when you do something for 8 years, you're going to both get better, and the style of which you do things is just going to change because you're changing. So it's got kind of a not terribly consistent feel to it, or at least I feel like that. I don't know if other people pick up on that, but that's
so you, for the most part, animated it in sequential order.
Yeah, after those first couple songs, when I started in that regard, I went in sequential order, and then I went back and updated the first third of it. Yeah.
Cool. That's interesting. Yeah, that would have been the first question I asked, but I just assumed that you didn't. I just assumed that you sat down and were like, well, this is the song I feel like doing today. And
no.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, I got one more.
Partly because I didn't know where it was going to go animation, especially because when I first started animating it, and I realized after doing a few songs that I was doing it so freeform and not really paying attention to the script. I realized that I had to I couldn't do one in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
If I did one in the middle, I might have changed what things were happening and how the people look and stuff. And then I get to that and I'm like, oh shit, So yeah, I kind of put myself in the position where that's how I needed to work on it.
That makes sense. All right, I got one more, and then we'll move into the hype section of the question and answer. You have filled this thing completely with movie. There's movie references all over the place, as well as the musical references that you have in your music, but the movie references. Why? What's your favorites? What are the ones that no one notices?
The why is just because, I love entertainment. I love movies. I'm a very mainstream guy. It's like obviously they're very mainstream movies that I chose, and a lot of mainstream music references for the most part. And TV shows. Like Twilight Zone is my favorite TV show. It's one of my favorite things. There's references. I that might be my favorite one. Although King Kong, I'm a lifelong King Kong fan. I got a King Kong doll up there on a shelf.
I got stuff to show you too. Yeah.
to come to a point where I was like, oh, well, this might be a place where I can do a King Kong homage and animate some of those scenes and put them in there. That was really, kind of, a lot of work, but really kind of cool to do. So I just did it because, ultimately the movie is so many things. Mostly it's a love story and a love letter to rock and roll. Obviously there's politics in there and philosophical ideas, but I want to be something that you could not even care or agree with those things, but just still like and enjoy it for the entertainment aspects. And one of those things was all those cultural references, which is just fun to do. When you're doing a free form animation thing and I'm writing a line, doing something to a line in a song, like where I went to the part where it's like, okay, I'm about to go into a montage. And so I'm like, well, maybe I'll just say montage. And I thought, oh, montage, Mary Tyler Moore. Okay, I'll do the quick Mary Tyler Moore thing, which is one of my favorite TV shows. So it's stuff like that. There's pretty much nothing in there that isn't because it's something, a TV show or movie that I love. Even Singing in the Rain. It's not that I'm a Singing in the Rain fan necessarily. It's a good movie, but like I said earlier, my father was a dancer. So it's like that's kind of a tip of the hat to him, essentially. So that's basically what it is. There's very little in there that's chance or that I just threw in to throw in. There might be a couple things that just because, I think this is funny, I'll, the penguins when he goes to the North Pole, it's not like I have something for penguins. I just thought that would be funny.
What did you call it? What's the city? What's the penguin city called?
Penguin. I think one was Penguilla or something. um, so yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like that. But most of those references is because it's something that's to some degree it's meaningful to me. It's something that I love. Gilligan's Island. It's not like I love it or the Brady Bunch, but I grew up on those things. They were on TV all the time when I was a kid. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, we're about the same age.
I don't remember if I have a Star Wars reference. I must have a Star Wars reference in there somewhere, right? I can't think of it. I mean, Star Wars was a defining moment in my life too, so I must have something in there. I just can't think of it. Well, the poster, that's an homage to the original Star Wars poster.
Yeah, cool. So we are your first film festival, and I saw a few days ago, you put it out online for people to see.
Yes, this past Wednesday, I'm gone very independent with it. Selling it on my own, renting it on my own.
How's that been?
It's going well. I'm getting some really nice feedback from people. It's hard to sell something yourself. There's both a self-conscious part of it, and then there's just the trying to learn how to do it, to understand building your own website, make it interface with an email server thing. It's so many things that just been driving me a little nutty. Doing them, and I finally gave myself a goal that was the day I was going to do it. I've been running some Facebook ads with certain songs, and so far I'm getting feedback from people. It's not like it's selling like hotcakes or anything, but I'm
I saw
you
this comment of the day, and
yeah, I've been doing that too. Yeah, and I'll probably continue that tomorrow or so. Today I wanted to focus on I made a little meme about watching it tonight. What are you going to watch tonight? Death of a Rockstar, of course. And I'll probably do stuff like that. I'll make little fun commercials for it going forward. And I also did kind of a tie-in with it. It's not on the version you have because I kind of thought of the idea after I uploaded it, and I didn't want to bother you with it after that, like asking to re-upload it. But at the very end, now the first title card in the movie tells people if they want, like I said earlier, if they want an alternative ending and bonus materials, go to rocketstar.com, and right there you sign up for the email list, and boom. So it's all part of the marketing of it, trying to make it into something more a fan base and get it out there as much as I possibly can.
I need more hype. They can go to your website. What's your website?
The website is deathofarockstar.com, just like the name of the movie. And that'll take you right to the Vimeo on demand page. Vimeo, Vimeo. Or you can go to the Vimeo app on Apple TV or Roku or on your phone and, look for Rocket Star's Death of a Rockstar on there. And those are the places you can find it. But it's easiest to go to deathofarockstar.com, buy it or rent it there. And then enjoy the movie. And afterwards, go to rocketstar.com and sign up on my mailing list so I can stay in touch with you, send you more music. It'll be a blast. My page is a blast, I tell you. My Facebook page. It's all rock and roll. I'm going to be doing videos where every couple of weeks where I talk about a certain band, what they mean to me. And
that's free. All they got to do is sign up on the
all that kind of stuff is free. It's all free for the email list.
Future plans for the movie. You're going to be playing some festivals too?
Yes, I have one lined up that you helped me get, as a matter of fact. Thank you so much. Other Worlds Festival in Texas. That'll be the Texas premiere. And they've been very, very nice. Bears Rebecca, I guess, is the leader of that festival. And yeah, they've been cool. They really latched on to it, I guess, because they're all big Bowie fans. And I remember Bears was watching. They emailed me while she was watching it to say, well, this is looking good. I'm a big Bowie fan or something like that. And I was like, yes, finally somebody who gets it,
Yeah.
And I think that they kind of really latched onto that, that aspect of it. And I'm really happy to do it because it's a genre film festival. And, not like I'm, the biggest sci-fi person or anything, but, I do have a place in my heart with Star Wars and 80s horror movies is a big thing for me. So I'm happy to be in it, But being in the Lake County for my debut is really awesome because I know you do this all on your own as well.
Yes.
And I thought, what a cool place for my movie to premiere. And I know we were going, about this back for a while, because when I was, my original goal was to be, you got to be in that big festival first, distributors, you want to get distributors, and it was just a different way of going about it. Not that that's the wrong way to go about it, but for me, I just eventually realized that, you know what, this guy really loves my movie. And I'm not really concerned. That's just not the way. It's not a commercial thing in that regard. It's indie. I have to find fans on my own. Let's let it go in this festival, its debut. Whether it gets in other ones because it's not the debut. Well, who gives a shit? Yeah. I'm thrilled about this one. Thrilled about Other Worlds. That's in December. And I've got some other ones that I'm still waiting to hear back from. Like I said, the film festivals don't generally get me, it seems, so I don't hold out a lot of hope for them, but we'll see how next year goes.
Any other plans, any chance of physical media or Kickstarter that you might do with some awesome prizes or anything?
Yeah, people have been asking about CDs and DVDs over the last month since I've been promoting it, and I do plan on doing CDs and DVDs. Hopefully
if you're
next year, it's like I really had to focus on this. I couldn't do this and focus on that. So after I get this running smoothly, then I'm going to start looking into doing a little package like that. I don't really quite understand the Kickstarter thing or what I do with that or how that would pertain to me. I'm not sure. But for now, that's what my next step will probably be in early next year is to try to get, some CDs and DVDs made and test the market to see how interested people are in that, and T-shirts, stuff like that.
Yeah. I would say though, if to me, if you're generating all this extra bonus material content, that would be great to have on a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
For sure. So that might mean holding off on physical media until you finish that stuff. But
that I would definitely have to, because I'm actually shooting a lot of it as it's coming out. Like I've only shot because I've when people get the emails, they get 3 or 4 days in a row, they get 1 or 2 kind of bonus material things. I send them both an extra ending, the original ending. The one you see now was the redone ending. And then there's a little video that I also send out with that where I sit there and talk about why I changed the ending out, what happened there, why I decided to not use it. And then I send also a video the next day, which is it's a whole nother song that's not in the opera, but it was a test run of the characters, of the 2 main characters. It was a video that I made for them very early on. It's very clunky looking, but you can kind of see where the animation started out looking like. And then I send, like I said, drawings, character drawings, a couple of different stages of them when I first did the first computer version drawings of them, early pencil drawings. And then it wraps up with the first episode of me talking about the first song, A Rockstar, how I came. A lot of the stuff we talked about here, but it's a little bit more detailed. It's about it. I think the first video was like 15 minutes, and then once a week for 26 weeks, I'll get one for each song where I talk about them.
Wow, cool.
And then in between there also, I'll be sending stuff out. Like I said, the series where I talk about different bands and what they meant to me and different aspects of rock and roll. I'll be sending those out to people, and more music. I recorded a whole another record in quarantine here in the spring version of quarantine, unlike the new one we're about to go through. I did it at home. It's a much rawer record than Death of Rockstar is. I did it all at home with whatever, and I had no real drums, just me banging on a djembe. But it's a pretty cool 10-song record, and I'll be putting that out at some point next year. And I've even got some videos shot for it that I'll be putting out. Some I'll be re-releasing. And I'm just keep the ball rolling with that, if I can maintain a fan base and get a not large enough email list. But yeah, like you said, I'll have to wait until I finish filming all those videos before I release it,
Kickstarter will let you sell those, will let you pre-sell those. And it'll let people make packages, and it'll let people be social and say, hey, look, I bought this on Kickstarter, and share the Kickstarter campaign, and let you make limited numbers of things. And I thought, characters of people with Rocky would be cool. I'd love.
I have to learn how to draw again.
Yeah. And we talked about an action figure. you know?
Yeah, I remember we talked about that, and I looked it up, and that was expensive. I think it was like the cheapest thing I could find. I think was like $35,000 for the prototype.
Man.
But which is a shame because oh man, that would be the ultimate. That cool would to be have an action figure made of the main character, Rocky Star, or any of them. Like I would just be bowled over to have some. Maybe sometime in the future. Who knows? Who knows where this will go? Who will see it and pick up on it? The
You might be able to find like an Etsy person that makes action figures that could give you a quote for 30 of them, and then you could put 30 on your Kickstarter.
People make action figures.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah, no, people make all sorts of crazy stuff, man.
Wow, it seems like an awfully complicated thing to make, but okay.
All right, well, I have to let you go. We've actually talked so long. I have someone popping in for the next Q&A already. There was supposed to be
a time person.
There was supposed to be a 45-minute gap in between, but I'll just roll right into the next one. All right, well, thanks so much. It was great to talk to you. Thanks so much for having us have the world premiere and sharing all this amazing story about how you made this and everything.
Thank you, Nat. I really appreciate you having me, and it's been a blast talking to you.
My pleasure. Anytime. I mean, hopefully once things die down, maybe we can chat again.
Absolutely. I love it.
Cool. All right. I'll see everyone back for the oh my god, what the fuck Q&A in just a couple minutes.